Hello everybody. Welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. And that you're all having a great day. Don't forget to leave a like. It is a free and easy way to support the channel. It helps out the algorithm a lot. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. We have, I don't want to say dramatic news, but a lot of the last couple of weeks, we've seen this optimism uptick in the cryptocurrency space where everyone was terrified just a couple of months ago at the idea of where the market was going to go. Unless you've forgotten, a lot of analysts, a lot of people in the news, everyone was talking about hyper doom and gloom. For some reason, that's shifted. Did you see that transaction? It was $503 million US. If you didn't see it, just pass by on the actual transactions on Bitcoin. I think sometimes I'm like, whatever. Anyway, I would have such anxieties sending nonetheless $1 million, $500 million worth of Bitcoin. Just like, okay, cool, just send it. Anyway, this optimism level has risen. We have gotten a lot of news about the amount of Bitcoin being taken off of crypto exchanges. We have not had so few Bitcoin on exchanges since 2017. I believe that was the number. Same exact thing with Ether. That was since 2015. There's literally barely anything left. And we keep having a lot of news, as we've been having since around the end of March, that April, May, and June are going to be significantly, awesomely amazing times for prices. And to be fair, in March, we actually did, I think we went up by 23% for Bitcoin's price. You know, we went down and it went back up. But it was still a good number to actually see. So, the news has gotten more intenselier, and you'll see. It's a little weird. Everyone, not someone, everyone is kind of under the assumption that everything is about to collapse and that everyone's going to move their capital into Bitcoin. If you've been here for the last 2 months, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's kind of like ramping up. And I said, this was like maybe 3 or 4 videos ago. I was like, it's scary, but also confusing because everyone's talking about like the demise of the US dollar and Bitcoin going to several $1 million per coin, but it's happening in such like a rampantly intense, I don't know, you'll see as we go through the video. Michael Saylor's Bitcoin acquisition strategy, it says, has long been hailed as visionary. You can take it back a bit. But a new voice in the crypto space is suggesting that it's time to go even bolder, apparently spending hundreds of millions of dollars and then billions of dollars on a digital asset simply wasn't enough, and he wants people to literally go the full Monty. His name is Richard Byworth. That is a very rich name. Partner at SYZ Capital, that's SYZ Capital, and advisor to Bitcoin firm Jan3, believes that as the Bitcoin supply on exchanges continues to shrink, Saylor's firm, MicroStrategy, should consider ramping up their purchasing efforts, even if it means stirring the markets. You'll see exactly what this man is talking about. And at some point, he's not going to have a choice, like it's going to happen organically, but he wants him to do it right now. Speaking at the end of April on a podcast, Byworth argued that the days of playing it safe through over-the-counter purchases might be numbered. He said there comes a point where the supply dries up. Wow, he got it. Maybe instead of quietly accumulating, MicroStrategy should go full throttle, buy in the open, push the price and let the market feel it, end quote. A lot of high-level institutions, very rich institutions who have been buying crypto, they've mainly been doing it over the counter. We have seen some instances before of companies announcing, hey, we're going to buy 5 million, and then we find out that they actually bought it through a cryptocurrency exchange. The issue, if you can be completely honest with yourself, has to do with greed. Michael Saylor doesn't care that his company almost has 600,000 Bitcoin, for those of you who missed it. I think it's like 588,000 at the time of me making this video, which is, they're going to go over 600,000. The problem is the extra level of greed. He doesn't want the market to move. He wants to accumulate at as low as a possible level as possible, irrespective of the fact that he has 600,000 Bitcoin. The average person will never own an entire Bitcoin. So that's also one of the main things. Secondly, these companies and institutions understand what's going on. They understand that there's big money at play. There's big money to be made. So they're trying desperately to only buy OTC over the counter. We used to have several hundred thousand Bitcoin on OTC markets. And then now I think the number where we are is around 120,000. So all it really takes is one big purchase from MicroStrategy, from Capital 21, from the United States of America, and fourth party, and all those OTC coins are like literally actually gone. So one of the other ideas, I know there's a lot of ideas here. One of the other ideas has to do with the actual would-be momentum of the market. You've heard about the supply crunch. The supply crunch literally has to do with this idea, like the magic trick I've been going over. Investors and institutions and companies and governments and sovereign whatever are able to slowly take Bitcoin off of exchanges and not really have it have an impact on prices. That's why we can hear that between BlackRock, MicroStrategy, and the other US ETF issuers, they've accumulated over 2 million Bitcoin in 15 months. And then you look back and go, we were at 109,000 and then we fell down to 77 something thousand. You can do it so slow that you can make it seem like there's no actual interest. That's why a lot of the news that we've been getting has been like, there hasn't been this little Bitcoin on exchanges in 7 years. There hasn't been this happen in the last 5 years. We haven't seen this level of, and then we look at the prices and we go, well, why the fudge is nothing happening? We had a news story about 2 or 3 months ago. There was an analyst, one of the first ones to chime in and say like, hey, back in February and March, he's like, we should be at least $150,000 per Bitcoin. He said it's basically because of like literal supply and demand. He said he calculated for every $1 billion worth of inflows into Bitcoin, we should logically be seeing anywhere from a 2 to a 4% rise in price per billion. He was like, all the money that we've seen flowing in just from the ETFs, we should be like nearing $200,000. And then you look at the actual data, and the over-the-counter market is like rapidly decreasing because these people are in silently going to crypto exchanges and like taking the supply that they have that's like in cold storage wallets, or they're going directly to people who are mining Bitcoin and saying, hey, we'll get coins from you instead. If we had the actual propulsion from their actual buys and, we would then also logically be even higher than we would normally be if it wasn't for the entire tariff thing that we also have going on. There's so many things at play, making sure that prices stay low or don't pump as high, even though I've had so many recent discussions with my friends. I told you before, I have a lot of friends who are in the market, but the frustration is like quite heavy when you look at things, when you see the news, when you hear what's going on, when you're well informed, and you go, what the heck is happening? So at some point, organically, the OTC markets will completely dry up. And this is also something we've been going over as well. I'm waiting for this kind of like shebang, this aha moment that pushes us to $1 million per coin. If BlackRock is going to accumulate another 400,000 Bitcoin to get to 1 million, if the United States is going to be accumulating another 800,000 Bitcoin to get to 1 million, if MicroStrategy alone is trying to accumulate another, literal 1 million Bitcoin. They said they want all the Bitcoin in the world. By the end of the year, they will have 1 million coins. If there's only 120,000 left on OTC markets, that's 1.6 million Bitcoin that they need to buy to fill those orders from those companies and that government. At some point, it has to happen. And it's just a matter of like when. So this guy is like, if you really want people to understand what's going on, but I don't think Michael Saylor does. A lot of people confuse greed with like Bitcoin maximalism. Bitcoin maximalism revolves around the idea that you want everyone on the planet to switch over to a Bitcoin-based system, to give people freedom, to give people so-and-so so that they don't rely on the old system. Michael Saylor openly said he's trying to convert MicroStrategy into a bank. He wants as much Bitcoin as possible at a lower price as possible so that he can literally have 1 million Bitcoin and be the biggest Bitcoin lender on the planet. That's where the difference really comes in. If Michael Saylor was an actual Bitcoin maximalist, and I say this from the vantage point of someone who's been in this market for a while and I've heard the teachings of old, you would simply buy on market. And you would persuade people and tell them to take their coins off of exchanges. That's what a real Bitcoin maximalist does. But this has to do with wanting to be the person to say that this thing that is made, and I don't know why people disagree with this. I can't for the energy in me understand at all, because I've said this before and people were like, no, that's wrong. And I'm like, no, it's absolutely correct. The point of Bitcoin isn't for you and your friends to hoard all of it. If you have, listen, if you have all the money in the world, money then has no value. Things only have value because other people on the planet are using them and holding them and having them. When you have a widely distributed market, that's how you really get things to be propelled forward. I said stuff like that before and people were like, you're just jealous of his money. And I'm like, you have no idea what this market is actually for or what it's meant to be. We're hyper integrating into the old system with the same old checks and balances, the same idea of a commodity and a security, and you have to do AML and KYC. People haven't learned anything. There's no point of Bitcoin. We could just go back to using paper money. I saw something. I was walking around and there was something written on a wall, and it was something like some graffiti about being anti-central bank digital currencies. Like it was some really, and I looked at it. I couldn't roll my eyes into the back of my head enough, because I was like, you idiot, you probably also have a bank card. You're tapping and swiping. You're like, do you mean to tell me the person who graffitied that, who's probably 27 and a half years old, you're only using cash? You're using quarters when you go pay for stuff? I assume you have a MacBook. I assume you have an iPad, an iPhone. Everything you do is already tracked. It's just like this really weird, people don't ever look a step forward to try and like, oh, maybe this doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, I'm getting completely off track. If we saw all of this buying actually happening on market at spot prices, we'd be a lot higher. When you sit here and you hear me talking about these people are buying up all of it in silence and there's not a lot of Bitcoin left, once again, people are like, okay, sure, there's tons of Bitcoin on OTC, and I'm like, you're not getting it. This is the magic trick. This isn't happening all behind the scenes. They don't want prices to go higher. They don't want you to even be inside of this market. They want prices to go lower so that you leave and they keep accumulating. How do I know that? Because we've had the same damn news for the last 9 years, over and over and over and over, as we see the supply of Bitcoin and Ether continue to drop on cryptocurrency exchanges. So at some point, they will be forced to buy at spot prices. If we really wanted more people in this market, you would buy at spot. You would buy on market You would rise prices up, and this is how you get the attention of other people, but that's not the point. Rich people don't want that. They don't want anyone else in this market. They want all of it for themselves. Anyway, yes. This was like slightly big news. It was a lot of people were framing it on different websites as like MicroStrategy's about to make an explosive move. And it was basically this guy being like, no, if they really want to like propel prices, if they really want to have like a super aggressive so-and-so, they would shift their policy and do it this way. But, you know, when you want 1 million Bitcoin, that's, you know, I guess you keep it hush hush. I'm not really sure. Also, lightly yes and lightly yes. Tying directly into this has to do with the people like screaming at the top of their lungs that amazing things are going to be happening to the cryptocurrency market. Arthur Hayes is back in the news. This man has been in the news like 89 times in 4 days. Arthur Hayes made a $1 million Bitcoin price prediction by the year 2028, urging investors to go long everything amid coming monetary chaos. If you missed the other videos before, we had the guy say it's the bull run, buy everything. There was another analyst a couple of weeks after who was like, people should be buying up assets right now. This is blah, 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 blah. And everyone, this is the lightly confusing part. The idea in their minds of monetary chaos, or like the world kind of slipping into whatever, also has to do with this idea that Bitcoin would be the chosen answer to kind of like get away from everything. If you didn't see a couple of days ago, it wasn't Ray Dalio. Maybe it was. There was someone recently who was like, yeah, so because of all the tariffs, a lot of countries are now actively, if you don't know this, get into the know, are now actively making sure that they de-dollarize. He was like, it you know, gives a lot in the direction of, while they continue to de-dollarize and they're like moving away from U.S. markets. If you haven't seen, a lot of sovereign wealth funds are de-investing from U.S. real estate and the U.S. dollar. Like they're literally selling their shares and all these things, and they're buying things within Europe. And this is also coupled with the news that we've been getting that these sovereign wealth funds have also been loading up on Bitcoin as they're getting rid of the U.S. dollar. Bitcoin bulls just got a major vote of confidence from one of crypto's most proactive minds. Speaking at the ongoing Token 2049 conference in Dubai, BitMEX co-founder Arthur Hayes doubled down on his prediction that Bitcoin will hit $1 million by 2028. That's a fairly normal number now. Most people say by 2029, 1 million. And then you get the Cathie Wood, who a couple of weeks ago, she said her new price target for Bitcoin by 2030 is $2.4 million because of scarcity. And I sit here wondering if that scarcity has to do with like logic or just like a number that she's pulling out of thin air, if you will. Because logically speaking, if the OTC markets dry up, there's only 120,000 Bitcoin there. The only place to go is crypto exchanges. If we see the same level of appetite, this will drive up Bitcoin's prices really far, but we just need to see the OTC markets actually dry up. The CIO declared to a packed audience, it's time to go long everything, urging them to pile into Bitcoin, as well as other stable coins and traditional markets alike. I'll explain stable coins in a second. For him, this isn't just an investment thesis, it's a macroeconomic inevitability. He goes back to like the way backs of how a lot of Bitcoin maximalists used to actually talk. They didn't say that at some point we might see the US dollar fall or we might see economic policies erode. They said, no, it is going to happen. There's no way around it. You can't stop countries from taking out debt. You can't stop countries from printing money because this is how the GDP is actually measured. You literally have to create more money and push more money into your markets, hoping that they'll grow to be able to brag to other countries, look, our economy grew. This is literally how it works. So, as everything seems to be like really, all it took was the interesting tariffs. And this is why we're seeing this it's not hyper Bitcoinization, this like hyper rush away from US products. And people believing, if you haven't checked news around and analysts, they're expecting by 2026, if the US economic policies haven't gotten it together, the US dollar's value is already like actually collapsing in real time against other currencies, that we are going to see like a literal shift in public of people being like, yeah, we can't use a dollar anymore. We're going to have to use Bitcoin. We're going to have to use so-and-so. We're going to have to blah, 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 blah. Stable coins are becoming quite large as well, as a number of countries are beginning to release their stable coins, which are their central bank digital currencies. It's the exact same thing, just with a different name. The word stable is there to confuse you. It's still controlled by the central bank and by a centralized entity, and will still be tracked and traced the same exact way that all stable coins are tracked and traced. Remember when we got that? Oh gosh, this was so stupid. This was a couple of years ago, when I think it was China, they released a news story trying to get people afraid of Tether, like in their country. Tether has always constantly been thrown under the bus as this like coin that like is being used by criminals and people at nighttime in the shadows. And I sat there. So the news story was from China that a number of criminals or something like that had stolen people's money, and which was also really stupid because that's not how their system even works. Everything is so closely tied together. You can trace and track anything. You cannot use even their social media. You can't cross the street. Everything, you are instantly identified. You walk into a store, you walk into the airport. There's no way that anyone can steal. First of all, they don't even use physical money. Secondly, everything is going through the apps. But they told the story that these criminals found a way to get digital money, and then they swapped it into Tether. And they wrote in these articles, they swapped it into Tether to have near private transactions to move this money around. And I was like, how on a scale of 1 to a million, how stupid do you think we actually are? Tether's transactions are so closely monitored. Remember like the 8 times that we've gotten news over multiple years that someone has actually stolen money? You know how many criminals actually swap that money into Tether and then realize like they can't use it because the people from Tether see the trend? Like the moment that money gets stolen from a crypto exchange and goes into Tether, that wallet address is frozen because all these people know each other and they're talking to each other and they're messaging each other. Hey, this just happened. And then that money gets frozen and again gets sent back to the crypto exchange, and those people end up being refunded. The news article from China was like, yeah, Tether's the worst thing ever. And I'm like, you are trying to make your own central bank digital currency stablecoin. You don't think that everyone else knows that Tether? It's just from a long line of people who've been desperately, it's so weird, desperately trying to throw dirt on Tether, but it's mainly because they did it right. Tether did exactly what everyone said that they wouldn't be able to do, and now they're the largest stablecoin. I think they control, was it like 95% of the market or something like that. So stablecoins are becoming quite big. And we had a couple of videos ago, PayPal and another company, they're beginning to offer yield on their stable coins. And this is mainly because we're moving into a more stable coiny world, as far as like, instead of using the money that you have, it will be denominated in like a digital thing and be on an actual like blockchain. So it'll be digitaler than it currently is. But a lot of stablecoin platforms are enticing people because if you have money in the bank and the bank is giving you 0.4% on your money, the stablecoin issuers are offering like 4% and 7% back on your money. So it becomes far more enticing for even an investor to be able to have their money sitting there on the side. If you have $1 million, at the end of the year, you made 7% back. That money goes into something else. You just keep becoming richer. Yeah. His optimism is based on a mix of monetary policy shifts and economic instability in the United States. The crypto investor sees a likely return to money printing by the Federal Reserve, spurred by fiscal deficits. tariff-fueled turmoil, and deteriorating bond markets that could dramatically inflate Bitcoin's price. I'm going to be 1,000% honest with you. It's exactly what I told my friends a couple days ago. If Bitcoin isn't at if Bitcoin's not at $500,000 by the end of this year, I think I might just give up. I think I might just go live in the woods. I think I might just buy some sheep and some cattle. We're only getting good news. We're only getting accumulation news. We're getting news that back in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, people in crypto salivated for. We're getting news that the US dollar is literally collapsing, that the Fed doesn't know what to do. They have to print more money to devalue the US dollar and lower interest rates just to keep the stock market afloat. We're seeing, the literal deterioration of the US dollar. Bonds aren't doing well either. All these companies, institutions, governments, sovereign wealth funds are buying hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. We have three companies, who are on their way to each trying to get to 1 million Bitcoin. The third one, for those of you who don't know, is Capital 21. We can't sustain these low prices. And I mean, even mentally, it is so odd to see all of this happening. We're getting the news that we wished for forever. And our market is not moving at all. At some point, you hear me out, you hear me, right? By the time we get to July, logically speaking, the OTC market should be dry. Dry as a freaking bone. We should be at a $200,000 Bitcoin by then, because we're already witnessing the literal supply shock, and it's happening because of institutions and corporate entities who are in this space. The amount of people around the world who are getting on stage and talking about the US dollar is done, Bitcoin's going to take over. We heard it twice from the guy who runs BlackRock. He literally said it twice. He was like, if the US doesn't get their debt, their money, the tariffs, the situation under control, the US dollar is going to falter and Bitcoin is going to become the world reserve currency. I feel like many days, once again, I'm optimistic on the cryptocurrency space, and you can even use the word bullish. But at a certain point, logic and realism just has to kind of step in, because otherwise I don't know. It feels so odd. It just doesn't feel right. Everything that's happening, even the news that we keep getting. We used to get news before that MicroStrategy had purchased $1.3 billion. And then that morning, the prices would rise, or people being like, oh my gosh, they bought so much. I think the last two times prices fell after MicroStrategy almost, they bought, was it 47,000 and something or other thousand, and got close to 600. And I was like, what's happening? What's going on? If all of these things are really taking place, which they are, if the US dollar is faltering, if tariffs are causing chaos, if all these countries are getting into Bitcoin, I really truly don't understand. And you can draw as many charts, you can give me as many lines as you want. You can tell me everything about the Simpsons, and you can tell me about this, and you can tell me about the no logic. I need actual logic. And I say this nicely, because I've been in the market for so long, I've heard all that nonsense 1,000 times. You wouldn't believe the amount of charts I've seen, the amount of lines, the amount of zigzags and up and every single analyst has something that looks completely different. Plan B has like a freaking rainbow chart. It goes from blue to green to red, wee, and it goes back to yellow into green into blue. No. I need logic. I need someone to tell me specifically, with all of this buying, why we are not at a near $500,000 Bitcoin. How many times can we keep hearing the echo? $1 million Bitcoin 2028, 2029, 2030. $2 million Bitcoin, $4 million Bitcoin, $14 million Bitcoin. What are we all missing that all these people know? Because we know some of the exact same information as they stand on stage or going to CNBC or they're talking into microphones. Right. So 2028, I know it sounds crazy, is only 2.5 years away. And this is by 2028, which means in English, it could happen at the end of 2027. It's just that by the time we enter 2028, we would already be at $1 million per coin. I told you all, by July, that'll be the biggest. July 1st, if we are at a $96,000 Bitcoin, $94,000 Bitcoin, red flag. Like something's wrong at that point. Because we've seen an absolutely ridiculous level of accumulation and buying and absorption by governments and companies and corporations. The ETFs in the United States are near 2 million Bitcoin. I don't care if you're buying OTC or not. That has to have some kind of an effect on the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges hasn't been this low since 2018. Excuse the heck out of me. What did you just say? Well, I think that's going to do it for this video. Rightio. I hope you've all enjoyed or got something from the video, because something has to happen. You cannot have good news every single day like this. And we're not at 200K. We're not at 250K. Ethereum's not at $7,000. The amount of the institutional Ether news is crazy. Like, it's actually completely out of this world bananas that we're getting all the time. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.